Good morning, everybody. We're going to hit you up with another presidential election. This one, the election of 1800. The incumbent president, John Adams, going to go for that second term. And put your seatbelts on, guys, because this is going to get a little cray-cray. So let's see what happens right now. Now, from this video on, we are always going to start with the incoming party. And the incoming party, in this case, are the Federalists. John Adams, Vice President under George Washington, elected in 1796 to succeed him. He is now going to go for that second term. He is from Massachusetts, but he does have another Federalist that is opposing him. Remember, we don't have the 12th Amendment, so this is possible. The Federalist that is opposing him is Charles Cotesworth Pinckney of South Carolina. Now, for the Democratic Republicans, the front runner for that party is the Vice President, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia. Remember, Adams was elected president. He's a Federalist. Jefferson was elected vice president. He's a Democratic Republican in 1796. So this is a really tense 4 years. Now, having a president and a vice president that really don't like each other. But Jefferson is also facing opposition from within his own party and from Pinckney and Adams, and that is from Aaron Burr of New York. Now, this election was a rematch of 1796. This is characterized by a lot of mudslinging. Federalists were spreading rumors that the Democratic Republicans were radicals who would ruin the country if they came into power. This was based on the fact that the Democratic Republicans supported the French Revolution. George Washington in 1798, at this time he's retired to Mount Vernon and he's out of office. He complained, quote, that you could as soon scrub the blackamoor white as to change the principles of a professed Democrat, and that he believed nothing unattempted to overturn the government of this country. Now, meanwhile, the Democratic Republicans were accusing the Federalists of subverting Republican principles with the Alien and Sedition Act, some of which were later declared unconstitutional after their expiration by the Supreme Court, in relying for their support on foreign immigrants. They also accused Federalists of favoring Britain in order to promote aristocratic, anti-democratic values. Now, the Alien and Sedition Acts. President Adams, he was facing dissident voices in the United States, and Adams is sensitive to criticism. Not only is he stubborn, but he's sensitive to criticism. And as a result, he makes one of the biggest mistakes of his presidency, and that's passing the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, we'll have legislation similar to this during the First World War, but this Alien and Sedition Act says that it was illegal to speak badly of the government, including the president. So you can actually get arrested if you go against the government. Today, people would think, oh, this is crazy. This is a violation of our free speech. But back then, it got passed. Federalists thought that this was okay to do. As a result of this, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions came up. And those resolutions said that the Alien and Sedition Act should be nullified within their borders, that states should have the right to nullify federal legislation. Now, no action was taken on this, and the Alien and Sedition Acts were eventually allowed to expire. But the topic of nullification is going to come up again in the 1830s. Now, Adams himself, he was not only attacked by Democratic Republicans, but he was also attacked by a group of Federalists. They called themselves High Federalists, and these guys were aligned with Alexander Hamilton. The Democratic Republicans felt that the Adams foreign policy was too favorable to Britain. They feared that the new army called up for the QuasiWar. It would oppress the people, they opposed new taxes to pay for the war, and they attacked the Alien and Sedition Acts as violations of states' rights and the Constitution. Now, the QuasiWar was an undeclared naval war between the United States and France. By the time the 19th century rolled around, 1800 rolled around, by the time the 18th century was coming to an end and the 19th century was beginning, the French were being particularly obnoxious. They were not respecting American shipping rights. And this was also as hostilities were going on between Britain and France. So this put the United States in a vulnerable position, and their shipping rights start getting disrespected by both France and later on Britain. Also, the XYZ affair occurred during Adams' presidency. To make peace with the French, President Adams sent a peace delegation to Paris. Now, when that delegation met up with their French counterparts, the Frenchmen asked for a bribe. Obviously, these diplomats didn't take the bribe, and this news was reported back to Philadelphia, and instead of referring to the Frenchmen by their correct names, they just referred to them as X, Y, and Z. And that's how we get the XYZ affair. So this created more problems with the French. Eventually, 1800, the Treaty of Montfrontaine put all these problems to rest. Now, High Federalists, they considered Adams to be too moderate, and they would have preferred the leadership of Alexander Hamilton instead. And Hamilton still attempting to undermine Adams, still trying to do some more trickery to undermine Adams' chances of being elected to a second term. The scheme this time was to elect vice presidential candidate Charles Cotesworth Pinckney to the presidency. One of Hamilton's letters, which was a scathing criticism of Adams that was 54 pages long, it became public when it came into the hands of a Democratic Republican. This embarrassed Adams and damaged Hamilton's efforts on behalf of Pinckney, and this also sped up Hamilton's own political decline. Now, Hamilton, he had apparently grown impatient with Adams, and he wanted a new president that was more receptive to his goals. During the Washington administration, Hamilton had been able to influence the federal response to the Whiskey Rebellion, which threatened the government's power to tax citizens. And by the way, that response to the Whiskey Rebellion was force. 12,500 troops marched into western Pennsylvania and put the rebellion down. When Washington announced that he would not seek a third term, Adams was widely recognized by the Federalists as next in line. Now, Hamilton appeared to have hoped that in 1796 that his influence within an Adams administration would be as great or greater than in Washington's. But by the time 1800 rolled around, he came to realize that Adams was too independent, and he chose to support Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. Given Pinckney's lack of political experience, he would have been expected to be open to Hamilton's influence, basically be a puppet of Mr. Hamilton. But however, as stated earlier, Hamilton's plan basically backfired right in his face, and it hurts the Federalist Party. With that in mind, this election is going to get a little cray-cray. So let's get to that right now. Tom Adams does lose out on his bid for a second term. He wins 65 electoral votes, and he wins 38.6% of the popular vote. Charles Cotesworth Pinckney gets 64 electoral votes. John Jay of New York only gets 1 electoral vote. But Jefferson and Aaron Burr, they are tied. They tied in the Electoral College. Each of them got 73 electoral votes. Jefferson 61.4% of the popular vote. By the way, Jefferson carrying 9 states, Adams carrying 7. Now, originally, this was not supposed to end up this way. The Democratic Republicans had planned for one of the electors to abstain from casting his second vote for Aaron Burr, which would have led to Jefferson receiving 1 electoral vote more than Burr. So Jefferson would have been president, Burr would have been vice president. The plan was mishandled, and each elector who voted for Jefferson cast their second ballot for Aaron Burr. And as a result of this, we get this tie in the Electoral College, and under the Constitution, it has to go to the House of Representatives, which is under the control of the Federalists. So we're ensured a Democratic Republican president, but who is that president going to be? We're going to take a look at that right now. Now, there were 16 states in the Union at the time. So 9 states were needed to win the election. Now, while it was common knowledge that Jefferson was the candidate for president and Burr for vice president, many Federalists were unwilling to support Jefferson, which had been their principal political opponent since this government got started. Seizing an opportunity to deny Jefferson the presidency, most Federalists voted for Burr, giving Burr 6 of the 8 states controlled by Federalists. The 7 delegations controlled by the Democratic Republicans all voted for Jefferson. Georgia's sole Federalist representative also voted for him, giving him 8 states. The Vermont delegation was evenly split between Federalists and Democratic Republicans and cast a blank ballot. The remaining state, Maryland, had 5 Federalist representatives to 3 Democratic Republicans. One of his Federalist representatives voted for Jefferson, and this forced the state delegation also to cast a blank ballot. So we go through 35 ballots. We don't have anything. We don't have a president yet. But come ballot number 36, Jefferson was elected president. Federalist James A. Bayard of Delaware and his allies in Maryland and Vermont all cast blank ballots. This was on February 17, 1800. By this time, the capital city had moved to Washington. Adams had moved into the White House. This resulted in the Maryland and Vermont votes changing from no selection to Jefferson, giving him the votes of 10 states in the presidency. Bayard, as the sole representative from Delaware, changed his vote for Burr to no selection. The 4 representatives present from South Carolina, all of them are Federalists, also changed the 3-1 selection of Burr to 4 abstentions. So as a result, we have 10 states for Jefferson, 4 states for Burr, 2 with no result. 9 is what you needed. So on the 36th ballot, Jefferson is elected president. Aaron Burr is elected vice president. Now, Alexander Hamilton doesn't like Aaron Burr, and those 2 guys are eventually going to duel, I believe in 1804, and Alexander Hamilton ends up getting killed. But nevertheless, Jefferson's president, Aaron Burr is vice president. Now, before we get to what came out of all this, this result was also affected by the 3/5 clause of the Constitution. Now, the 3/5 clause, you could go all the way back to the Constitutional Convention. When it came to the issue of slavery, this is what they did. The word slavery was never mentioned in the Constitution, but the 3/5 clause stated that when it came to representation in Congress, slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person. Now, had this 3/5 clause not existed, Adams would have won re-election. albeit with a lower number of popular votes than Jefferson. Remember, you don't have to necessarily win the popular vote to win the election, because we have indirect elections to the United States presidency. Now, subsequently, Jefferson was criticized as having won the Temple of Liberty on the shoulders of slaves, but really doesn't matter. Jefferson's president. Now, the 12th Amendment was ratified in 1804 as a result of what happened in this election. Now, electors are now required to cast only one vote for both president and vice president. So, we love our new system. Sometimes it might get a little cray-cray, but it's better than, having a Federalist for president, a Democratic Republican for vice president, and tying in the Electoral College. Jefferson is going to serve his first term, but he's going to go for the second one in the election of 1804. That election we'll talk about next time. And before we go, the Federalists would never win a presidential election again after 1796, but the Federalists are still going to remain around until the middle of the 1810s. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope we got a lot out of it. And with that, we will see you next time.